Welcome to the Military Mindset for Business show, where we unpack the mysteries of military precision and performance so you can apply these principles in your business. So today's a really important episode as we hit number 2. And what it's really about is telling the story of how the military mindset for business, this principle and this way of thinking even came into exist. So today I've got my good friend, business partner, and basically we shadow each other in nearly everything that we do in business, Matthew Blake Moseley. Mose.
Hey, mate. Thanks for having us, and thanks for the full name. I don't want to leave any of the important bits out.
No, that's right. So Matt and I, our story is almost the same story. We were in the army together, and I'll get Matt to share, how we got to this point.
Yeah, well, God, it's scary to think that it was probably even longer than 15 years ago now. It was probably 2004, 2005.
2005.
Yeah, where we both made the decision for different reasons, I suppose, to join the military. And we met each other at a little place called the Royal Military College, Duntroon, down in Canberra, where we were about to undertake our 18 months of officer training. A long time ago, scary to think how long ago it was now and how young I was back then, but how you're pretty much still the same age.
Well, my little story joining the army really quickly was I used to be a farmer. In a moment of madness, I rocked up to recruiting in Townsville and basically just signed up and ended up at Duntroon. Why did you join the army? How did you get there?
I think I was one of those, underachievers at high school. I never really knew what I wanted to do. I didn't get great results, but in year 10, my mum actually did send away to get some information on the army. And then I didn't really think about it again after that. I think they sent through, at that time I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. I didn't really know what that meant, and it probably wasn't the right fit for me at all. And then while I was at uni, again, I think I was studying social science, no offense to those who have done it before, but there's not a lot to it. And I was just sort of doing it because it was pretty much the only degree I could get into. And at the time I saw that there was some scheme in the military where they'd pay for your degree if you joined this program. And so I applied for it and basically went through. And they said, look, your degree is not really what we're looking for, but, we think you've got potential, which is pretty much the story of my life. And they said, why don't you, quit uni and come to Duntroon next year? So I did, and loved it, but at the time I was just sort of looking for something, and that was it.
Well, I know a lot about you, and we've spent many almost years together now. But I didn't realize it was your mum that may have been the catalyst to send you to the army. So that's is that something saying there that your mum wanted you out? Or?
Well, I did ask her, and I did ask her to send me that stuff, but maybe she wanted to get rid of me. Probably wasn't the best to kids at the time.
So in that classic officer way of doing things, getting someone else to do something for you is getting mum to help you do your initial application.
Well, that's it. Military mindset's all about delegation, and I was delegating from a young age. So,
brilliant. Hey, so we kicked off. We did Duntroon together. We both graduated, both as logisticians. Tell us a little bit about your story, which is virtually the same as my story, with a slight difference.
Yeah, well, did my time at Duntroon. Got through it. It's a difficult 18 months for anyone who has done it before. Again, being the underachiever I am, I actually wanted to go to infantry corps, but the results weren't there at the time. I was 18, to paint the picture. Just been introduced to alcohol, just been introduced to, actually going from earning about, $2,000 a year to earning, much, much more than that. And probably got a little excited at the time, but still managed to get through, still managed to graduate, which I thought was, an achievement enough in itself, especially at that age. But yeah, wanted to go to infantry corps, didn't get it. It was quite competitive. There was I look back at some of the classmates we had that did go to infantry, like all guns, all jets, even now still doing amazing things. But I was lucky enough to get transport corps, which is, one of the logistics elements within the military, and moved on to that, did your logistics training and moved into a career as a logistics officer, sort of, I suppose majoring would be the word, but my speciality was water and road transport, which was pretty cool, and I really enjoyed the time.
So if anyone knows Canberra, there is a place called Mooseheads down there, and everyone in that is posted to Canberra gets a little bit of Mooseheads, frequent flyer mileage. But I think Matt had the platinum card.
I was up there. Hour of Power on a Thursday night. Shout out to
Hour of Power on Thursday. Many the downfall of a staff cadet. So we got into the army together. We had pretty cool careers. For me, it was the best job I ever had in my life. I was also a logistics officer, which was RAME, which is the Royal Australian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, which is a really cool job because I had some really clever, smart tradies, but I didn't know how to do their job. Like they're technicians, I wasn't. And some great experiences, including, and I don't mean to say this to gloat, but I am going to gloat, nearly spending my whole career in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. So yeah.
What a rip-off. And that is like, just so everyone's aware, that is unheard of. It's pretty much done through like wheeling and dealing. Like I did my time. I went Canberra, went to Townsville, posted to Darwin, back to Townsville, finally got back to Sydney while, Pete's just sitting down on Oxford Street, drinking his little lattes and, probably doesn't even know what field is, to be honest.
Hey, don't tell me about hardship. I did 2 years in Holsworthy with the mighty Old Faithful 3rd Battalion, 3 RAR, before I did then transfer and spend the rest of my career in the eastern suburbs. Enough of that, though, is like in a classic story in the military of individual experiences do vary. And, it's just really such a broad career. We've got, the valiant warfighters who are, out the front leading the charge through, to us noble logisticians that are, right there behind them, supporting them. And like literally for us, it was, well, for me, it was the best job of my career. We both had the pleasure of, of deploying to Afghanistan, plus some other East Timor. You had a pretty cool boat trip. Now, tell us about your boat trip.
Yeah, attached to the UK Navy and Marines around the Middle East for 2.5 months. I was lucky enough to be on the flagship. So, there was basically a fleet of about 15, 20 ships sailing around the Middle East. Most of the ships didn't see land. We came alongside and did different events and different engagements at pretty much every port, pretty much from Crete all the way up into Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Oman, got to Pakistan, got to India, while a lot of the other ships were just, floating along on the sea. We got to get alongside and check out the different elements. And I think that's one of the great things about the military. The differences of jobs and the sort of vast elements that you're exposed to, coming from transport corps, getting to, start at road transport up at Darwin, moving to water transport, where I had pretty much the coolest title, I think, biased in the military. I was called the Beach Master.
Beach Master. Sounds like definitely something that rocks Coogee and Bondi, on the weekend. The Beach Master.
The Beach Master, which was a pretty cool title. And basically what that was you were the link between the Navy and the Army in terms of the logistic link. But, you got to do all those things and experience all those things. And, I was pretty lucky because a lot of people, when they do deploy, they go to war zones. I got a few trips, with being attached to the UK, where I got to see some pretty cool places of the world as well. They weren't just, fighting and disaster going on.
Yeah, picking up some of those countries. So after a time on the flagship of Her Majesty's Navy,
the King,
the King now. We got back to, so we basically, after our separate trips to Afghanistan and got back, we were on a course down in Albury Wodonga, logistics officers advanced course, which I think was combined with one of the Arms Corps advanced courses. And it was a 5-week how to plan a brigade attack, maybe planning course, was it?
Definitely a planning course, but basically, the whole part of it is to, advance you as a logistics officer. The big component is, how to plan properly, how to plan deliberately, and how to, interact with the different elements. So it's not just focusing on your one lane. It's about looking at the different elements in the battle space, and being able to make sure that they all interact, they all work together. And that's why you sort of get attached to, the different elements. And, it's a long course. It's a difficult course. It's a lot of theory. It's a lot of planning. And, as lovely as Albury is, it is pretty cold down there, and it's pretty far away from Sydney, where, you know, me and Pete were posted at the time.
Funny, that course was probably the first time that we really crystallized military training and started to applying it to business concepts. Like at that time, we were definitely still full timers, set down the career path, but we had, well, I really was at that course where we both realized that we had this inkling or passion to make a transition and go into business one day. And
I
that
think
course, yeah, after you.
I think that's really important because, you know, the military is a great job, but like you said before, everyone's experiences differ. And, you know, there came a time, and it was at that time that we both sort of realized that, you know, that we did love what we were doing. We were ready to look at something else.
Yeah. And in that course, like we traveled back, you know, from Albury to Sydney back and forward every weekend. So left course knock off, 5 o'clock on a Friday hour. It's a significant drive back to Sydney. We're looking at 5 hours or so in the beast, which was the Red Rocket with no rate.
What a car.
I still don't remember whether it had a radio or not, but it didn't have a good radio, and 5 hours of relatively, you know, you're a good bloke, but it's a long time to be stuck in a car.
Yeah. You can't be on for 5 hours straight. You know, you can't be blending down funnies and, you know, having great conversation for 5 hours straight. That's for sure.
So it was in these car rides that we actually thought, like, how are we literally going to pass the time together? How are we going to kill that time between the Sydney and back every week? So we basically said, why don't we use these principles, literally the principles that we just learnt the week before about how to do a brigade advance and phase lines and all these different decisive events and cool military acronyms, and thought, let's have a crack at building a business plan using exactly this model.
And that's the thing too, because obviously at the time you go on these courses and, you know, you get told to do, you know, the military appreciation process, and you're pretty much hating life while you're doing it a lot of the time, because you're going through it and you're like, oh, I just can't be bothered. You know, you've got this guy's really into it and he wants to get a good mark, and, you know, I'm sort of keen, but I've got my eye on something else. But the funny thing was, when we were in the car, I was loving it. And I was like, this is like the best thing ever. Yeah. And I like really enjoyed those car rides, even though that when we got back to base, we had to do the exact same thing. And I would go back to being like, oh, I can't be bothered.
And again, it's a funny thing, you know, like the military is such an amazing job to be a part of. The people that you connect with, the purpose, the passion behind it all, the training gets top notch. But we were at that point of transition. And I'd been sitting on this idea for many years because, about 18 months, driving home from Victoria Barracks in Eastern Sydney along one of the main roads, I heard something pop up on the radio. And it was the New South Wales government has just passed legislation to say that every apartment in the state needs a window lock. So as I'm driving down the road, being the ideas guy that I am, I'm like, man, there's got to be a lot of windows in Sydney. And as Mose and I were driving back and forward, Albury, I was like, I'd been sitting on this idea and I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. Like, I'm just not good personally at getting things done. And I took an approach where I said, well, better to share something than keep all of nothing to myself. So that became the essence of what is Secure Windows.
Yeah. And Pete would have probably straight away drove home and jumped on GoDaddy or something else like that, and you know, reserve the URL. So if anyone out there is looking for a random URL, Pete probably already owns it, and he'll sell it to you for a very competitive price, no doubt.
I've got about 20 of them up my sleeve. Yeah, I definitely got a few. But yeah, so that was Secure Windows was started in that car ride. From your perspective, tell us about where you were in transitioning from the military into that business.
Yeah, well, I think at that time I knew I wanted to get out. I knew I wanted to get into business. I'd always had an eye for it. You know me, I don't read too many books, but at that time I was reading a lot of books around, you know, self-employment, entrepreneurship, 4-hour work weeks, all that type of good stuff. And I knew that's where I wanted to go. But at the same time, I'm not the ideas guy. Like, you know, Pete will have an idea every 4 seconds pretty much. I'm not saying that those ideas are great. Some are, you know, by probably, yeah, they need to be filtered. But I was just probably looking for something to sink our teeth into. And I suppose what I really liked about the Secure Windows thing, and, you know, where the applications of what we learn in the military is, you need to understand that at the time, Like secure windows and the legislation around window locks, it's not an easy business. It's not something that we had prior knowledge in. It's not like we decided we were going to get out and go do, consulting to the military around our profession. Secure windows was something completely different. There were so many different facets to it, and there were so many different things to consider. And at the time, we didn't even know what they were. And the great thing is we used, the MAP, the military appreciation process, and pretty much the principles that we've learned through our career to go through this planning process. And we did it really deliberately. And we really went through the steps and we got a lot out of it. And it was actually quite amazing to see the applications that it had for a real-time business.
We almost did it subconsciously. Sorry, it was a blend of conscious and subconscious here. There were deliberate actions, as you said, through. We went through the military appreciation process. We developed things like phase lines in terms of if we haven't achieved this point by now, then we will stop doing it or we'll switch targets. However, if we do achieve the objectives of this at this point, we'll push on. And then we just kept meeting more and more goals and pushing on. Having said that, the military mindset for business model wasn't formed. That came a little bit later in terms of what we've got today. But go through a bit of the growth and what were the key drivers of accidental growth in secure windows and where that business went to.
Yeah, well, I just want to come back to the planning process because I think there's a bit more to talk about with that, because I think, at the time, obviously there was the military side of it where, you had elements of the MAP, which include like, terrain analysis, enemy analysis, course of action analysis, a range of different things. Obviously those things don't directly tie in, like terrain. When the military is talking about the terrain, they're talking about hills, creeks, buildings, things like that. But we were able to sort of, mash that into, rather than looking at, what hills are around for secure windows, it's more like looking at the operating space. Similarly, for like enemy analysis, we didn't look at who our enemies were. We looked at who our competitors were. And then we're able to go through the planning steps to really build that out. And in the end, we had a pretty comprehensive plan where, like Pete said, it was all phased, it was all done. So, if we can get to this point, if we can, we will keep going. If we can't, and there's any hold up by a certain timeline, we'll just walk away and we'll go and do something else.
But we just kept hitting those marks, and the business went from 3 to 30 staff in the first 18 months. We had it to multi 7 figures in revenue like super quick. And one of the decisive things in terms of our future was winning the first Prime Minister's Veteran Employment Award for Veteran Employer of the Year. Tell us about going to those DVA forums and understanding this piece about military and veteran entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so I think like after we won that award, which was amazing to win, we still remember going down to Parliament House that night and, being around all those other amazing businesses and those amazing individuals, politicians, war heroes, and looking back on that. And it was a great point for us as a business. And we were able to take down to our 2 other business partners, Ryan Hall and Marty Fleedner, who, had a great time down there as well. But I suppose after we won that, it did open up a lot of doors, especially to getting invited to DVA forums and DVA events. And we really found as we went to those events that a lot of the discussion was around individuals transitioning to get a job or to move into a government role rather than to transition into running their own business. And we saw that as a gap pretty much in, what we believed that a lot of people wanted to do.
Yeah, this is the opportunities for veterans and people out of the military, to go into innovative careers and start their own businesses and get entrepreneurship. Like I love telling one of my favorite stories, which is 2 private soldiers who fought at Gallipoli, survived that campaign. Then they went to France in the Western Front, and they were offered to go and do a cutting edge technology military course, which was learn how to fly, like unheard of at the time, 1915 or something. They took those skills, and when they left the military, moved out to Western Queensland, bought a little plane, and using their skills that they learned in the military, founded Qantas, which is a national icon. Some of the other companies out there like JB Holland, Dan Murphy's one of everybody's favorites. Coles Myer Group. These are all massive businesses started by veterans. And even now we've got thousands, tens of thousands of veteran-owned businesses in Australia out there, largely unrecognized, still contributing, to the community through their businesses. So, Matt, tell us about VCBC, what it is, and why we kicked it off.
Yeah, well, I think, after going to those forums, we really identified the fact that, there wasn't a voice there for it. And we created a little Facebook group. I think we got to, like 1,000 people on there. It was quite active, quite quickly. And just sort of from there, we just didn't really take it too formally, too seriously. But after a bit of research, a bit of, investigation, seeing how other countries had done it, we realized that, in Australia, apart from probably the Prince's Trust, there wasn't really any organizations that were focused on, veteran entrepreneurship or veteran self-employment. And so, we decided that something more formal was probably needed, and that, this would be a good vehicle to be able to support veterans and their spouses in moving into entrepreneurship or supporting their growth while they're already on that journey.
So the Veteran Community Business Chamber, Maddie and I kicked this off really as something for us to share for either veterans or partners with existing businesses. How do we connect and support your identification and help win work because you are a great, veteran business, but also for people in the military, providing you some shining lights. And there's thousands of great examples out there of if you choose a different path and you don't want to get a job and you want to start your own business, like we've got some great examples out there. So anyone interested in Veteran Community Business Chamber, hit us up on Facebook, socials, vcbc.org.au, and come and check it out. But I'm going to bring it back to this military mindset for business model and how we've been able to really crystallize and articulate this into an actual framework now. And going through the furnace of secure windows, where we did pretty well, but man, we left millions of dollars of revenue on the table because we're pretty well cuffing it. We sort of
made a lot of mistakes.
Well. We made lots of mistakes. So, and it was really on reflection of that experience in our first business and the desire to not make those mistakes twice, that we crystallized this model of military mindset for business. And it's now been directly applied into how we founded Trust the Process. So, Mose, just give us a quick rundown on Trust the Process and what that business does.
Yeah, so I suppose after our time in Secure Windows, we basically got to a stage where all the window locks in New South Wales were put on. We would have installed thousands upon thousands of them.
Hundreds of thousands
even.
Heaps.
And,
just hold that thought. How many window locks did you put on, Mose?
Oh, mate, it's too many to count. I'm not very good with the drill, okay? Everyone knows their strengths and their weaknesses. I did follow around Pete at the start.
Mose did not put one window lock on, not one, like literally out of hundreds, and he takes that as as a accolade, not a distraction. But
well, delegation has always been a passion of mine. And so I just knew that it was better off someone else do it than me. I don't want to break any of those windows. It costs too much money every time we cracked a window.
The epitome of delegation, and but well played on that. So back to the transition.
Yeah, so we got to the stage where we'd had put all the window locks on, and any new building that was being built, the builders were putting it on, so there wasn't really any requirement there for secure windows. We did look into compliance, we looked into a few other areas, but we realized our passion didn't really lie there. And I suppose one of the important things that we did learn during Secure Windows is we learned to embrace, the military aspect of business. And we did have a point probably after that car ride where we turned our backs a little bit on, using military principles. And there was one point where we were doing okay. We might've had 10 or 15 staff, but we were struggling with process. And it wasn't until we reflected and went back on, what we'd learned in the military and put that into Secure Windows that we really saw a dramatic shift. And, that military aspect was a huge part. And probably the other big aspect was our ability to utilize virtual assistants from the Philippines. And we were able to do this through a Filipino cadet that came through Duntroon with us. And he introduced us to one of his good friends, a lady named Day. And Day started with us 2 hours a day, and now she's full-time and now trusts the process. She's head of operations. But basically with all that stuff, we learned sort of two key lessons: the importance of military principles and process. And we also learned the importance of delegation, and, specifically through, offshore workers from the Philippines. So we took those things, we looked at maybe moving secure windows into something else, but basically we thought, look, this is what we want to do. And we realized where our passion lie, and that lay with helping small businesses. So we started with trust the process, and we do a couple of key things there, but it's all based around our systemize, automate, delegate mantra. Systemize through process, automate through platforms, and delegate through people. And so basically we help small businesses systemize.
And taking that, I think that systemize, automate, delegate was really the crystallization for what we have now as the 5 pillars of the military mindset for business, which are purpose, planning, platforms, people, and process. Right. So we understood that, in order to operate in your higher space, you've either got to create good systems or good process to be able to have consistency. Then after that, we've got to use automation and technology and the platform as best as possible. And again, you've got to have the right people. Now, when we went down the outsourcing route and, integrated a lot of these amazing, offshore team members, it was actually a massive driver for our ability to hire Australians. When we were able to shift that balance of the wages load, it freed up so much cash that we were actually able to tenfold our Australian workforce by having better efficiencies running through. But I want to talk now about the 5 pillars of military mindset and the ways that we've applied them, through our various businesses, because this is some of the key takeaways for others, at the end of the show. So first of all, let's talk about purpose. Now, when we first got into purpose, we didn't really believe in what vision and mission values were. So can you explain to me in your words what vision, mission, and values are, and how, when you sincerely believe in them, what they do for business?
Yeah, I think, this was something too that in the military, they had a lot of this stuff around, commander's intent, vision, 1 up, 2 up, and all that stuff. And at the time as well, sometimes I was guilty of thinking, maybe it's just a little bit token. But I think, after maturing a little bit, you realize how important it really is, because this stuff drives the entire direction of your business. And so I suppose in the first instance, you have your vision, your why statement, your purpose for why you're doing it. And this really is the overarching element for everything in your business. Underneath that, you have your mission, and your mission is how you achieve that why, how you achieve that purpose. And then obviously underneath that, you've got your values, which are a list of aspects, elements, things within your business that really should drive everything. And combined, that should be able to guide how your business operates and should be able to drive decision-making from within the business, because they should be able to look at those vision, mission, values and use that to guide them to make the right decision.
That's really important, especially the decision-making part. The military is all about purpose. And when you're in the military, you just feel that you're part of something bigger. And the military is really good at nesting mission statements. Like, for example, the mission of the Australian Army, last time I checked, was to win the land battle. Okay, so that's what the Army's purpose is. And then all the way down through the various brigades and battalions into companies, your individual mission just keeps nesting down until you understand what your piece of that purpose is. In Trust the Process, our vision is to empower people to focus on their passion. And the way we do that is through our mission, which is elite performance through people, processes, and platforms. But our core values, which are the non-negotiables, brilliant at the basics, one team, many places. Matt's favorite one, work smarter, not harder. Speak up, your voice matters. And this is really important because we've got a global team of hundreds of people now. And my favorite, we practice what we preach. And what Matt said before about decision-making is really important. Is anyone on our team is allowed to make a decision according to their risk threshold, but they have to read our vision and mission values first. And if they're about to make a decision based on those vision and mission values, it's a very powerful way to deliver tempo and maneuver in the business, to be able to take advantages of opportunities that might be fleeting. Okay, so we want to really infuse that lower level decision making, to everybody in the team, so we can really grasp opportunities as they arise. So purpose is critical.
I'll just add to that with the purpose side as a real-time example from, back in Secure Windows days. Probably one of the things that really lost us the most money was our mistakes we made with recruitment and hiring. At the time, we were growing quite quickly. We had to work there 100%, but we got to a stage where we would hire anyone with a drill, and we would be like, okay, cool. You can point to me what a drill looks like. You're hired. And at the time, though we did have a vision, mission, values, we were just focused on growth. We weren't thinking about anything else. And the problem with that is, training up a new staff member would take away our best installer, which means they'd be putting on less locks. And over the space of probably 3 months, we probably went through about maybe 10 to 15 staff that we had to either fire due to performance, attitude, or a range of different things, or they would just disappear. And it wasn't until we stopped and paused and we went, look, we're not hiring the right type of person. And we looked at it, and we had probably about 20, 25 staff who fit in perfectly with the culture, fit in perfectly with our vision, mission, values. And we went, you know what, let's just keep it like this, keep it at the 25. There's no point to keep pushing it further. And it wasn't until then that we realized that, we had 25 great guys who fit in the vision, mission, values, that we actually went from, losing a lot of money to starting to make profit and making, great headway.
And it's funny, you mentioned before about being token. You probably come up with a token statement first, and then you test and adjust it and test and adjust it. But it's when you finally form those combination of words that represent the founders, that the founders are accountable to as well, that really it really infuses who you are as a business and why you get things done. And for me now, I'm a full believer in this stuff. Like, if you don't fit our vision, mission, values, you're not part of the team. That's pretty straightforward. Purpose. The next thing we've got in our pillars of the military mindset is one thing that we almost do entirely in the military, that what I've seen is very, very, very poorly done in business, and that is planning. Right. So when we're in the military, particularly as senior non-commissioned officers and as officers, you probably spend most of your time either doing planning or planning for exercises or planning for, it's all we actually ever do. And I think one of the key differences that the military does planning that we need to apply to business is current operations, future operations, and then we separate planning from that as well. So I just want to quickly explain. Current operations is everything that you do today in your revenue cycle. It's doing your marketing. It's creating a sale. It's rostering your team. It's building the product. It's delivering that product. It's getting paid. It's doing your accounts receivable. It's everything that you do day to day to deliver your product. So, and it may be from now to about 2 or 3 months in the future. So that's what we call current operations. But it's our ability to break out of current operations and the weeds of today and start planning for tomorrow, which we call future operations, which might be 3 to 12 months away, and further to that, actual plans, which might not even happen for a year or two away, that we really start driving business growth. Mate, can you just share some examples of current and future operations within how we do business, and particularly planning, and what's some of our goals?
I think this is really important stuff as well, because, how many business owners out there are just stuck in the day-to-day? And, a lot of them are just focused on, getting that next job, getting that next, invoice out, that they don't look forward. And without looking forward, how can you possibly grow? So I suppose, like, in terms of talking about, current operations, depending on what you are, like for us, it might be our next HubSpot build. So we win a HubSpot job, we implement CRMs, current operations for us is what CRMs are we building this week? And, it's very easy to get the blinkers on for that. When you're talking about, future operations, you're looking at stuff probably 3 to 6 months down the track. So continuing on with, the CRM side, maybe in 3 to 6 months, we want to develop a potential to maybe create integrations or, build our own custom sort of platforms. And that's something that's going to be 6 months away. If we don't start thinking about that now, it's not going to happen in 6 months. And then future plans might be along the lines of, again, keeping to the same method. We might want to create our own CRM down the track, which we don't. But, it might be something along that line. And that's something that if I don't start planning for it today, or if I want it to happen in 5 years, I need it to start today. So we need to start the planning cycle for that.
It's really challenging for business owners to find the time, to dedicate the time to create those plans. And one thing that's really important with planning is when we actually have a plan and we lay it out on the table and we phase it out and we understand the steps that it's going to take us to get there. So we create the plan and then we start thinking about what could go wrong. What are some of the redundancies here? And that's what really is the difference between military planning and business planning. So a lot of businesses they might plan their 3 months, 1 year, 3 year goals, but they don't say, so what? In the military, if we were to go out and attack a hill, we have to consider the so what. We have to consider what happens if there's a tank hidden in the bushes. What happens if there's an obstacle that we can't cross? How do we still achieve our mission with all of the possibilities of what could go wrong rather than just pretending greenfields that everything's going to be fine? Now, we're going to really there's some good speakers coming up in following podcasts. We're going to really unpack military planning and how we apply it to business. But again, if you want to get out of the weeds of the day-to-day and have your business grow, you've got to dedicate the time to operate in future operations and to put in time to develop your plans of things that aren't going to happen. After we do planning, we've got to have process. So processes for me is about consistency. And this is the third pillar of the military mindset. Process is how do we capture excellence and repeat? How do we rapidly find the best way to do something and then deliver that with consistency? So particularly in secure Windows and fastidiously now in Trust the Process, hence the name of the business, Trust the Process, but we are all about process, performance, and improvement for ourselves, not just for others.
And yeah, I think, a lot of the time when people say process, they think of dirty words. They think of these crazy operations manuals that you need to spend 4 or 5 months doing. And I suppose the thing about process is, like Pete said, it's about how do you develop consistency. And to come back to the army, I still remember the process that they put in place for when you get shot at. Obviously, me and Pete were never shot at, but when you do basic training, and it's run, down, crawl, observe, aim, fire. And it's as simple as that. It's just an actions on drill that if you get shot at, you run, you crawl, you observe, you aim, you fire. And I still remember that. It just comes out so easily because it's imprinted in you. I suppose in business, when you're talking about process, especially small business and even to medium-sized business, people can be quite apprehensive about it because it does take a lot of work. But we're not talking about developing these complex operations manuals, because the thing about small businesses especially is you're always evolving, you're always changing. But how can you really capture that excellence and then provide that consistency so that everyone in the business, when something happens, can then straight away go and do it without thinking and do it in the same manner so you're not going to have issues or errors?
I think that I keep coming back to that word consistency. Like process improvement, performance, it sounds super dry, super stale. Even though I love it, because if I can develop great processes, I can delegate them. If you have consistency in what you do and you have the best way to do something and you can capture that, you can delegate it. So that's why, Matt and I love process. But think of it in this word consistency. It's so easy in business to go down different pathways, to have the same kind of client, but deliver them, do something different to last time. Consistency is the key to everything in creating simplicity. Okay. And consistency, like where I come back from, to have a general's mindset, I've got a statement that is a general needs control. Okay. In the military, when we think of a general, someone who potentially is in charge of 5 or 10 or 20,000 people and has the ability to control their destiny in a swipe of their pen. If there's one thing you look at a general, it's control, right? But how do you get control? It's 2 parts. Control, you need consistency. When a general gives orders or instructions, he knows how they are going to be completed. But what he also needs is visibility. He knows how they need to get, he needs to know that they have been done, or she needs to know that they've been done. So the general's mindset equation, control equals consistency plus visibility. And consistency comes through our processes. Now, visibility leads us on to the next pillar of the military mindset, which is platforms. So tell us about how we use platforms in business and how we use platforms to create an advantage to win.
Yeah, well, I think like for me, platforms is really the things that pulls everything together. And when we speak of platforms, we're basically talking about, and usually just off the shelf, like CRMs, accounting software, proposal software, pretty much like technology. What we would class in the military is like your operating systems. These things are where you can really make your processes and really drive consistency throughout the business. And what we talk about is, like, as an example, a sales process. So rather than having a sales process up in your mind, you've got your sales process in your CRM. And so there's key steps, key tasks, key emails that need to be sent along the journey. And it's consistent and it's standardized and it's controlled. And this means that when you get a new staff member in through your system or through your platform, they obviously would require training and they would require some development, but they should be able to come in, jump into the CRM, take a client or a lead through the sales process, following the key steps, ticking them off as you go. And that there will give you what you need to have that consistency within the business.
In the military, platforms are game changing. If you bring a tank to a infantry fight, if you bring a combat armed helicopter to the situation, a person with the right platform can be game changing in the way that you win. So in business, our application of the most appropriate, of the best platform to use can create these same advantages over our competitors. Now, one of the key principles of the military is information to create intelligence. And if we get the right information in, we can convert it into a form that we can use to make decisions. And this is where I come back to the visibility piece. Your platforms should be the key driver of information gathering in your business. You're the master CRM builder and dashboard builder. Tell us about how we get information to create intelligence to make decisions in our business.
Yeah, I think obviously data is king. And I think that all data should drive your decision making. Within the business and within, platforms, you've got the element to be able to drive that data in. And it's little things like when it gets to certain stages, why did we win this deal? Is it because of certain reasons? And by having those fields present, then you can report on them. I think, one of the biggest issues in businesses is they don't use the data to decide the decision. They don't use data to drive their decision making. They're using the feel. They're using their own intuition, which is sometimes fine. But in the end, you can't argue with the facts and what's there. And it'll paint a very clear picture of what's going on in your business. But without it, it really sets yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And I think it's critical. And having this right information, like if you were doing an advance on a hill again, and you weren't getting the information feeds, if you weren't looking for intelligence to let you know that you're about to be ambushed, it's a recipe for disaster. So we use the information that we receive from our platforms to be able to allow us to make decisions. So we started off with purpose, why we exist. Then we went through planning, and that's how we're going to get there. Then we spoke about processes, which is all about how driving consistency. We've had a bit of a chat about platforms, but last and not least, people is the critical thing here. For me, people is the capstone on the military mindset for business, and how we combine the first 4 Ps and empower our people is really the make or break in what we do. And the first thing I've got to say about people is recognizing our strengths and weaknesses. I've been lucky enough to have a business partner and colleague and mate that absolutely complements everything that I'm not good at, few and far between, but you're good at all that, and vice versa. Just, so many business owners are out there driving things by themselves. I just go through how we as a, double-headed monster of a business effectively run, our businesses.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously fine to do it yourself. Like, I'm obviously pretty biased. I prefer to have a business partner because there's a lot of stresses, a lot of things to worry about. And yeah, I think it is important to offset your skills. But more importantly than that, if you are going to work with someone, I think the key is to have clear and defined roles. And without that, that's where you do get the two-headed monster. I think in a lot of businesses, you see them, fail because they're both arguing the same point, fighting the same issue, trying to do the same thing. And I think the thing we've always been good at, even from, secure Windows days, is we've always had really clear and defined roles. And then we've also gave the respect to those roles as required. So depending on, what we're actually doing and depending on the element that it's in, if you're responsible for that, you have overall say. Now, I still get my buy-in, I still get my opinion, but in the end, it comes down to that individual's decision.
Yeah, in our first business, as I was the CEO of Secure Windows, and to be honest, I didn't do a good job. I really took too much of my army behavior, too much of an autocratic style across that business, and really, didn't do the best job. So now we're in Trust the Process. Matt's the CEO. So even though I'm a co-owner and co-founder and all of that, I play my role, which is, in the team space, I'm a head of department. But I'm more than happy to play that role and be, to use the term, subservient to the structure. Because again, military mindset for business, organizational hierarchy, and the general's mindset is the vessel about how we drive purpose and planning and process and actually get things done through that organizational hierarchy structure. So the other thing that we've got here when we're looking at people, and I guess the most powerful lesson that I learned from the military with people management is mission command and the art of delegation, operating in your higher space. Mose, tell us in your words, how did you get to run, this business? And for me, I don't see you really doing too much, to be honest, but it seems to run pretty well.
Yeah, well, I think, when it comes to small business, especially, how many people do you hear saying like lines along the lines of, I can't let someone else do that. It's just easier if I do it myself. No one can do it like I can. I don't think I've ever said that. And, that's probably one of my strengths. I'm quite happy to delegate things off. And I think there's definitely merit in that, because when you start a business, it is your baby. You grow it up from nothing. But I think the important thing about people and, especially delegation and mission command is you need to understand that you can't get to a certain level by doing it all yourself. And you need to let go of things. And funnily enough, pretty much all these principles of the five Ps, if you do them, it'll give you more control in your business. And probably, specifically to people, if you can set up ways to get people to do, the tasks that you were doing or delegate to them in an effective way, you will get more control of the business, because that will then allow you to step back, view what other people are doing. And obviously when you say that, you don't just give them a task and then let them go. You set, a duty statement, you set processes, you set KPIs so that you can monitor it, and you use that data to be able to view it in an easy and clear way. And by doing that, it'll give you much more control of your business.
So let's unpack the 5 Ps and the 4 Ps and how they relate to the 5th, right? Purpose. If your people understand who you are and why you exist, it gives them a shining light into the distance of where they're aiming for. Planning. If your people can buy in and understand the plan, they'll know the direction, how to get to that shining light. Process. If you can create consistency in what you do, your people can understand, the framework of what they need to do day to day with consistency and not live in a vacuum of confusion. Then it comes to platforms. Platforms are the piece, as Matt said, that ties it together to give us visibility, what everyone does. But coming back to mission command, one of my favorite things is to empower people. And mission command is all about pushing decision-making and responsibility down to the lowest possible level within somebody's, risk threshold. There's a couple of things we need for mission command to work. First of all, we need consistency in process. Okay. We need a shared understanding of what's going to happen. We need trust. Okay. We need great teams that we can actually trust the people to do what we can do. It is the antithesis of micromanagement. we empower people who are great at their job to come up with the plans to do their job. A real simple way that you can apply Mission Command in your business. Instead of telling somebody how to do their job, give them an effect or an end state of what the job will look like when it's completed. Okay. Let's just say they've got a month to do a project. First thing you do is you say, look, here is your outcome and here's the resources that you've got to achieve it. Go away and write me a plan and bring that plan back to me in 2 or 3 days and let me understand your plan. So immediately you've been able to delegate to somebody how they're going to actually create their own journey. You haven't had to worry and spend all that time writing that work for them. They come back to you with a plan, and this is how you maintain control. It's what we call the back brief. So when they give you the plan, you've now got the authority to test and adjust and to guide and mentor and teach people how to adjust their plan to achieve your goals. And then let them go ahead and execute the plan after you've given them your guidance. So it's a really empowering way to give people the autonomy to do a great job at what they're probably better than you at doing anyway. So people, for me, we use the 4 Ps, being purpose, planning, process, and platforms, to really empower our people to do a great job. And that's the essence of the military mindset.
Yeah, I think you can't really, you couldn't overvalue the concept of Mission Command, just because of the fact that it really lets staff members buy in. It really gives them empowerment within the business, and you'll see better results. And it's also a great way to develop your staff members as well, because quite often they might not be at that level where they are ready to maybe do that task as good as you. But with your interaction and with constant back briefs, it can be a great way to upskill them and get them to that level.
So if you're a veteran business owner or you're in the military and you're keen about business, go and check out the Veteran Community Business Chamber, www.vcbc.org.au, and you'll also find us on all the suite of socials. This show's been brought to you by Trust the Process, www.trusttheprocess.com.au. If you want to find more out about Matt and I and what we do, come check us out. But the whole point of this Military Mindset for Business series is to actually meet great people who have got amazing insights about how they've put this into practice in their own businesses. So stay tuned to the next episode as we unpack the mysteries of military precision and performance and give you the tools that you can apply into your own business. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers.